Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 3, Episode 10, The Portrait. In this episode, our friends are all coping, or failing to cope, with Colin Robinson's death, which leads his weird transformation to be totally overlooked by everybody but Laszlo. And I remain baffled at what's happening here. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. So, everybody, I was talking last time about how weird I found Colin Robinson's death, that it felt like they didn't really know what to do with him anymore, and I think that could probably still be the reason they've chosen to do what they're doing. But it turns out he's not dead. He's just turned into a baby. In one of the more unsettling bits of CGI this show has ever done. And I'm really, really curious what we're going to see, because the show doesn't have, I would imagine, a massive budget for doing CGI. So what I expect is that he isn't going to remain a baby for long. That probably something's going to happen to, like, either he has a really quick aging because of the magic of whatever's happening to him, or perhaps he is going to be like pulling energy, and that is going to cause him to grow more quickly, or even it could just be that he does remain a baby, but we don't actually like see his face that often. You know, whatever happens winds up being filmed in such a way that they don't have to spend that much on CGI because they are managing to fit it in other ways. So this episode, I really hated the last one. I don't think I've ever used the word hate for any episodes of this show before, but I'm going to use it on that last one. That is an episode that I would 100% skip every rewatch if the person with me had already seen it, because you don't really want to skip Colin's death. Like, that feels like a big plot beat, but otherwise I absolutely wouldn't go back to it ever again. That said, I was really concerned about what the finale was going to be like, because I just didn't really, my feelings on this whole thing were, if this is the penultimate episode and that you're going to be wrapping things up after that, like, how you really have to pull it out in order to make it a finale that counts, and I'm going to give this finale a C-. It wasn't an F, it wasn't as flat out terrible as the previous episode, but it still didn't hold too many laughs, and I found it to be kind of just frustrating to watch. And I think that where I've come down is there's a sense of real irritation for me, I think, in that they have brought up this whole thing with Guillermo being a vampire killer and his skill and all of this. And they have had him use this to his advantage, a number of times in a way that's fun to watch. But it hasn't resulted in any substantial changes in his own goals or his decisions with, like, dealing with this crew. And I think I'm getting a little bit impatient with that. I think that's where I'm at, is that, like, I feel as if the show wants to sort of have its cake and eat it too, by having Guillermo put in this position that feels like it's the antithesis of everything he actually wants. He wants to become a vampire. He wants to live this whole life, but everything about where he comes from flies in direct conflict with that. And I think they want that for the laughs of that obvious conflict, but then they don't want to like mix up the like basic formula of the show, which is pretty much that he is the sad sack punching bag of everybody in the house. And I was willing to like try to be patient throughout this season and allow them to do what they were going to do, because I expected that we would end up somewhere slightly different. And it doesn't feel like we've ended up anywhere different at all. It just feels like we've had more of the same. And I'm wondering what the deal is with his like abilities at this point. It just doesn't really feel, even though like there's a scene this episode with him and Nandor fighting, it doesn't feel for me like all that much has changed. The only things that we've had are him jumping in and like rescuing Nandor and stuff and using his vampire fighting skills in that respect. But I was hoping for a little bit more in the direction of Guillermo, like starting to come into himself, and I just didn't quite get it. So I think that's part of it. And like I said, it just wasn't really very funny. There are a few moments, but mostly I don't feel like I actually laughed out loud watching this episode either. So I'm really curious, y'all. Like, you know, Max has already commissioned all of season 4, and I'm really hopeful that things pick up in that season. But I'm really curious how you guys all feel about this episode and the previous one, because I went onto IMDb just to see the rating for this episode, and I was startled. I don't remember how many like stars it got, because I think they do an out of 10 per for each episode of TV shows if enough people vote. I don't remember what the actual score was. I just remember seeing a lot of really, really positive responses and being genuinely like shocked by that. And then I got to a few that said basically what I said, which is just like, I don't really get what they're doing. The jokes fell flat and went on too long. But for me, this didn't feel like a season finale. I don't feel like I don't know. It just didn't really hit for me. So I'm a little bit let down. I'm relieved it wasn't as bad as the previous one, but I was really hoping the previous episode was going to be a complete blip. And it seems like really what we're getting is more of a like, that was a low in a season that had a few more lows in some places. I don't know. I'm a little bit worried, y'all. I just am. So let's just talk about this from the beginning, because we start off with everybody posing for a portrait, and we find out that, what's his name? Donald Logue. Is that his name? He is the one that's painting the portrait, and he is the guy who's from Blade. And it was actually, I thought this was like a really interesting bit that they had him here, like boring everybody to death with this, like him describing what it's like to work in show business and in movies. And he is actually like a pretty decent artist, but he's not amazing. It's just, you know, he was there and they decided to take advantage of him for this. And what it turns out is going on is that this is like a tradition. When somebody dies, even though the vampires all deal with death on the daily with the people that they kill and eat, they don't really know how to cope too well. So this is like part of the ritual is you get a new portrait made without the person who died, and then you replace the portrait you had and move on with your life, and kind of, it seems, don't really acknowledge what's going on with their death. And they all vaguely seem to be aware that this is like not really the way to handle it, but putting forth the effort emotionally is not of any interest at all. the only person who keeps pushing for everybody to like, go around and say something that you liked about Colin is Guillermo. And what we find out is that he has got a pretty like strong vested interest in this. And that is that he believes the balance of the group had been that there were 4 vampires. And now that there's only 3, he feels it's really time that they add a new vampire to the group and restore that balance. And this is the thing that I feel like just kind of bored of is I would like Guillermo to be a little bit more torn at this point on whether he wants to be a vampire. And that's not necessarily about how the appeal of being a vampire, being powerful, being immortal, all of that can still be there. But like there could be other factors that he's starting to feel like, I don't know, man, I mean, he's living with some losers. Let's be honest. The vampires in this show are kind of losers. And what if he really started to like step back and look at that a little bit? So he's like saying, I think they should really restore the balance. And I would argue, Guillermo, no offense, but Colin, yeah, he was a vampire technically speaking, but he wasn't like them. So I don't feel like there has been any balance thrown off here at all. I think that this is just Guillermo trying to be really opportunistic. And I'm wondering if his like insistence that they deal with Colin Robinson, if he's sort of hoping that if they begin to talk about Colin Robinson, people will start to get a little bit more sentimental and that's going to cause them to want to turn him. And genuinely, dude, why would you think that? What about this group leads you to believe that you still have any chance whatsoever at becoming a vampire? Also, Nandor, he is apparently going to just give up on doing a super slumber. We don't go back to that at all this episode. There's no like even mention of it. So I'm very curious about what the like, I guess it's supposed to be that now that Colin has died, he has decided he needs to try something else, like that the death of his friend has caused him to reevaluate wanting to just like skip things and sleep through them. And so he has chosen not to go back into his super slumber. But I would have liked if we had a little bit more of a like conversation about that. Because the whole thing has been this entire time that nobody does really seem to care that much about Colin. We've got Laszlo, who says he had talked in the last episode about how much more time he was spending with Colin, which I had commented on a while back, and that he was apparently doing that because he had found out that Colin was going to be dying soon. And he wanted to help this guy live out some really good last years of his life. Or last days of his life, as the case may be. And so the fact that, like, Colin dies and now Nandor just decides that he's not going to go back into his super slumber, that's not a conclusion I would have really expected of him. I would just like a little bit more about what caused his massive change in decision there. And honestly, because we get Nadja, she's been being promoted basically. I am willing to overlook, I was hoping like the fact that he had chosen to stay awake, that maybe she would have an issue, because she was looking forward, as much as she just didn't want Nandor to go into his super slumber and was a big drama queen about it. You could see that, like, the idea of just ruling by herself wasn't a terrible notion. She hated fighting with Nandor for power all the time anyway. So I was expecting her to kind of be like, hey, maybe you should go back into that super slumber, buddy. What do you say? And be consistently pushing for that. But it's the episode is much, much more about everybody kind of reeling from Colin's death and not dealing with it too well. But what's weird is that it's like the episode is ostensibly about that, but it still feels like it doesn't quite hang together, really. So they're getting their portrait painted. Guillermo is attempting to get everybody talking about Colin, and nobody is biting. And eventually they kind of get into like a tiff about things. And I think it's Nadja. Oh no, it's Nandor is the first one to like storm off. And eventually Nadja does too. She's talking about the corpse has barely begun to stink, and now we've got the Tao of Steve painting our portrait. Nandor says Nadja's masking her true feelings with a joke. That was not a joke. A joke has a punchline. You wouldn't know a joke if you... What is it? I'm going to try and find this bit. Because it's something that ends with penny farthing. And I was like, I don't get it here. Here it is. That was not a joke. A joke has a punchline, and you wouldn't know a punchline if it ran over your scrotum with a penny farthing. I don't even know what... If it ran over your scrotum with a penny farthing, like the joke is holding the penny farthing? Penny farthing is money, right? What? I don't even know what this means. But anyway, everybody starts laughing. And this is when Nandor gets mad and says, fuck you. And he does the fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, you're cool, fuck you. Which I was like, really? We're gonna do that? And then everybody splits up, and Donald is just sitting there like, all right, well, why don't we just take a little bit of a break, and I'll chill here and we'll reconvene a little bit later. And I should mention that the Baron is here, and also the original vampire. And they're just like kind of chilling on this settee the whole episode and don't really move ever that I can see. Which I actually thought was a pretty good bit. I just like them chilling and sort of watching everything happen around them. And the Baron talking to the original and looking at him with this sort of like, I don't know. Do you know what's going on? What should we do? And the original just shrugging at him. I actually did enjoy this. So, did I say hi to Asher? Hi, Asher. So this leads to Nandor being like, I don't know, everything is kind of hitting me hard. And I'm realizing that even eternal life can be snuffed out. And maybe, oh, nope, you know what? I lie. He says, it has made me realize I need to make the most of my life. So I guess this is like, he doesn't mention the super slumber. He says this is why I have decided to leave Staten Island. But just because he doesn't mention it, I mean, I feel like that addresses it decently. So yeah, he says I want to travel the world. And behind him, Guillermo has come in and is genuinely startled at the fact that Nandor is talking about like running off by himself and hasn't consulted with him, hasn't run this by him at all. And Guillermo says something about how I'm not going to drop everything and just go with you. To which Nandor says, you're one of the things that I need to get away from. And Guillermo has a moment here that I wanted to go further than it did. So he's like, my mom is here, my life is here, yada, yada, yada. Nandor saying, I need to get away from you. That's part of making this fresh start. No offense. And Guillermo is like, so how are you going to travel? And he posits this like, I am the only one who could possibly handle like getting you equipped to travel. To which Nandor basically admits that's true and is saying, you're going to be the one to figure out my last trip for me, and this is going to be your final duty. And then does, you don't understand because, and Guillermo says, you're not a vampire. And this is when Nandor says, Nadja and Laszlo are also itching to get away. And I'm not going to be the last one here all alone like a fucking loser. Which gives Guillermo an idea. And he thinks that if he is able to keep Nadja and Laszlo from leaving, that maybe Nandor won't go either. That unless it's a group trip, it's not going to happen. So he walks in on the two of them doing their little like speech to the camera. I do enjoy the way that he sneaks up on Nadja and she turns around and grabs him by the throat and just is like, what the fuck do you not see? We're doing this thing right now. But he is trying to suss out the overall energy of the two of them. And here is when Nadja comes up with the idea of, let's all go to England. And it turns out she's playing it in the moment like this is an idea that has just suddenly come to her, and that it's for Laszlo's benefit because it's his homeland and all of this. And I really do enjoy that she says we could go on one of those like double-decker buses and make love in it. We could get into a black cab and make love in it. We could go to Madame Tussauds and look around. That was a good joke. I don't know. But this is when Laszlo says, I have made a vow never to go back there again. And it turns out later on, we find out that there was like a whole class thing in his community that made him turn on them. And it was like about Nadja. So this is part of why he has decided he's never going back. I was really sure, you guys, that it was going to turn out he wasn't talking about Nadja, but she had just interpreted it that way from like the context, and he didn't correct her. And that when the camera pulled away, then he would turn to them and be like, actually, that was about Stephanie, but I forgot that Nadja would definitely think it was about her, so I'm just going to let her have that one. But no, it apparently was about Nadja. So Guillermo follows her, and she plays a new tape that she has just gotten, which I keep forgetting that the Vampiric Council communicates via VHS tape. So she's got a message, dark greetings. I love how they always start with that. And they tell her that her work on the Vampiric Council has been very impressive and everyone's going on about it, and thus we would be delighted for you to join us in London, where you will take a position that ranks among the highest of all worldwide Vampiric Council positions. We hope you'll accept this opportunity because, as you know, vampires hate waiting. And accept as fast as you can. Tape your acceptance speech on VHS tape, put it in an envelope and send it by mail, and eventually it'll get to us. And when she mentions this later in front of evil Mabel, that she got this promotion, Mabel seems truly startled in a way that I was trying to interpret, and I couldn't decide whether she was startled because Nadja has seemed so incompetent to her that the idea she would have been promoted is like truly irritating, or if she thought that Nadja like was getting a position that she herself was hoping to get, and if there was a touch of jealousy in it. But there was also, the only reason I don't think this is what's going on is because the tape appeared to be so official. But I almost wondered for a moment if it were a trap. The way that Mabel reacts felt like, wait, what? As if it were something that she had just straight up never heard of before. And I just can't decide, like, she doesn't get a chance. I thought after that reaction that we would have her speaking to the camera about how she feels regarding Nadja's promotion. And we don't get that moment, which really surprised me. So I am sort of left wondering exactly what that's all about and why she reacted that way. Because, like, I understand that Nadja hasn't been amazing at her job, but I feel that she's certainly done better than, like, Nandor has. And considering that all it took for them to get promoted in the first place was to kill a bunch of vampires, it doesn't wholly surprise me that after it maybe has gotten around that Nadja killed Nandor, that she gets another promotion. That, I could see, considering the way they have decided to play this before, that maybe that's on theme for them, actually. So as much as the only thing that I could think was, like, it's meant to be a joke about, and this is something that is quite true in its way, but people, if you have worked in, like, any sort of business that has a high, what's the word I want? I was about to say a hierarchy, and that isn't the thing. A hierarchy. A lot of times you'll see somebody getting promoted over and over again, and it will feel kind of baffling. Like, the people who deserve promotions are often people who take their job seriously enough that those jobs know I can continue to take advantage of you and just, like, wring every single bit of willingness and, you know, and pride out of you and keep you exactly where you are, but get you to do the work of multiple people and pay you the work of one person. So you get these, like, wild choices sometimes of people who get promoted that you're like, this person neither wants nor deserves this promotion, and what the fuck. So I thought maybe that was all it was supposed to be. Sort of like the joke of, Colin Robinson getting promoted after working somewhere that he doesn't even know what the job is, and they don't seem to really have a good reason for choosing him. But they do, because he is a bland white man. And that is just what tends to happen. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I was, like, wondering if there's going to be anything that circles back with that. And the fact that Mabel didn't know this was coming, that it came, like, on a VHS, that she's the one that has tended to be the deliverer of good news. Like, the last time that they watched a video where they got the promotion, Mabel brought the videos with her and played them while she was standing there, right? And this is the first time that she has gotten one she's gotten this tape solo and nobody else has any idea what's happening. So I think that's the only reason that I'm sort of, like, side-eyeing this and wondering if it's really what it looks like. And it probably is. It probably is. But it just sort of got my attention. So anyway, Guillermo is talking to Nadja about her plans and the fact that she definitely won't go if Laszlo won't go. So Guillermo decides that he's going to go over and double check that Laszlo is very committed to this oath he took to never return to jolly old England. And the way that Laszlo responds, it leaves Guillermo feeling like, you know what? I really don't know why I got so worried that they were going to do this anyway, because the vampires are always out here making these, like, big grandiose plans, and they very rarely follow through with, like, any of them. And probably they're all just going to kind of forget about this. And he did not factor in Mabel to this equation. So it turns out that Mabel is really good at planning vampire travel. And this is something that she has done for the Vampiric Council and is like one of the few parts of her job that she really enjoys. And she has some like very good tips that do kind of make Guillermo look, I won't say they make him look bad, but they make him look like kind of basic and uncreative. Like she talks about the shipping and the way it would work for them to travel in their coffins. She talks about how if you just like fill a JanSport backpack with your ancestral soil, you can carry it with you and lay down absolutely wherever. And the energy of this all, I was like, again, sort of noticing that Mabel's the one who was reacting to Nadja's announcement of her promotion, but she's also the one that's really been helping Nandor with his like travel plans here. And yet again, I had a sort of moment of like, is this what it looks like? Or is she trying to get him to leave? And I think I'm just reading into it too much. I don't think it's that deep. I really don't. It's just, you know, I'm used to reading things with this sort of suspicious mind. So anyway, this conversation settles the fact that Nandor is definitely going to leave. Guillermo is feeling really irritated. She eventually leaves, and they decide that they are going to reconvene for their portrait. And in the conversation, as they're sitting there, Guillermo tries to talk about the fact that they're all a chosen family, that it's a rare thing and very important, and all of them should really come together, and that they mean something to each other. And all of a sudden, Nadja just blurts out that she wants to go to England and that she has been offered a job. And Laszlo says, "Over my dead body." And then Nandor, "I have decided to leave the island of Staten, travel the world, and rediscover my groove." And then we get the announcement from Laszlo about why he made this this vow. They didn't care about the whoring. They didn't even care that I was a vampire, but they did object to the fact that I fell in love and eventually married the most beautiful, simple girl. A girl with no surname, no social standing. And they called her a peasant. And I do have to say, I appreciated this a great deal. That Laszlo, his whole reason for like refusing to return is based on the fact that they didn't accept his wife. This is husband material. That you disrespect my wife and I'm just going to fucking bail and never come back. I am really hoping he's telling the truth. I think he is, but I just really hope it is, because it's very sweet, and she's obviously caught way off guard by this. Apparently, he never explained it to her. She knows about the vow, but she doesn't know why he made it. So I guess he just was trying to sort of save her feelings. And I do appreciate the fact that, like, in England, the thing that they all had the biggest problem with, whoring, no big deal. Being a vampire, also no big deal. Married a peasant, now we've got a problem. That feels right. That feels true to me. You know, like the class thing is something that I don't think as Americans we understand quite the same way. Like, not to say that we don't have classism. We absolutely do. But it's a really different sort of beast here. It's got a different energy to it a lot of the time, where it's much more about the impression that you give and the way you live. And in England, things are so based on actual titles. And because we have had it drilled into our head that that sort of thing doesn't matter in the US. We have this really strange kind of conflict where classism absolutely exists here, and we have got respect for people with titles and whatnot. But we also try and pretend that sort of thing doesn't matter and that it doesn't factor in. So it's this denial, you know, where we're trying to have it both ways. And in England, it's so much more overt and pronounced, and it's so much like the legacy of it goes back such a way that I find it remarkable when I'm reminded how alive and well it is, because I think about that sort of classism as being a relic that fell to the wayside in like the 20s and 30s, you know, right? Like basically that the First World War, that was like the beginning of the end of that sort of, that hierarchy really mattering to anybody. And I think to a degree that may have like caused it to lessen, but it's still very much alive. And I just don't think of it as being current. I think of it as being in the past. And every time I'm reminded that it's still a thing, I'm startled. So all this to say that Laszlo's story makes sense. I think, you know, it all falls together. And this is when she tells him that she is getting a position on the Supreme Vampiric Council. And if they were to go back to England, they would be there as the top tier, upper crust. Like, you know, it would be a completely different situation. This is when we get Mabel chiming in with, wait, what? And like her face has a look of disbelief that feels a little bit hostile. I'm just going to say. So yeah, he says, really? And then says, well, that changes pretty much fucking everything. Count me in. And she's very excited. Of course, Guillermo is like, but you did make a vow to never go back. And I'm like, dude, you've lost it. You've lost. You just have to let them do, like, come on. So he had mentioned earlier that, and this is Laszlo, that he hadn't let anybody else see Colin Robinson's body, and also that he hadn't gone down himself. I'm willing to accept that nobody else has gone down there, but I do find it kind of weird that he's guarding Colin Robinson, because like the man's head's already been caved in. Like, what more do you think could happen? And why are you taking it upon yourself in this way? Whatever it is, eventually we have this thing, and I'm going to jump ahead because I want to talk about what goes on with Guillermo and Nandor. But he comes up from the basement and he's acting really shady, and there's a very clear, like, he's just seen some shit expression on his face. And I was like, all right, so something's going on with Colin down there. But he doesn't say anything. He just goes along with this whole plan that his wife is outlining. And we are at like the pier where their coffins are laid out. And he is loading, I think he says Pedialyte and Oreos into the crate that Guillermo is going to be in. And he says something about how this is like gold over there. If I've got this, I can trade it for whatever I want. And Guillermo clearly is sort of puzzled, but just accepts this. And he tucks Nadja into her, he downloaded all of RuPaul's Drag Race, I think he says, onto the iPad, but he tucks her into her coffin. She's super excited. And then as he is beginning to like help Laszlo down, he shoves Guillermo into the coffin and with his super speed nails it shut. And Guillermo is supposed to be going to like meet Nandor at the train and is yelling like, "Master, wait for me." And I'm just like, dude, what do you think? Do you think he's going to hear you? And Laszlo goes home to cope with the fact that there is a weird baby parasite that just climbed out of Colin Robinson. His body has like an open hole gaping from its torso and a slug trail of slime that like goes down the hallway. And eventually he stumbles across a Voldemort-like baby with a man's face on it. And that face is Colin Robinson's face. Now, my question here is, why didn't Laszlo explain what was going on to Nadja? The choice to just like bail on her and send Guillermo in his place, and he says it he says to Guillermo, "I chose you because I know that you can look after her." But it didn't really work for me that Laszlo cares so much more about Colin that after making this discovery, he would just abandon his wife with no explanation in order to take care of this weird creature. Like, I am not saying, because Laszlo has weirdly seemed to feel a sort of responsibility for Colin recently, and as much as I find it a weird development that it's because he found out Colin was going to die and all of this, I'm willing to accept that, even though I think it feels a bit patchy. However, it's one thing to be like, I care about this dude and I came down and I discovered this thing and now it's causing me to like rethink some things. And it's another thing to pretend to continue to go along with the plan and then like lock a man in a trunk and send him off with your wife instead and return home to, I don't know, like care for this baby. I was really unsure what to think about this, and I'm curious about y'all. Like, and don't get me wrong, I know that we're Laszlo to explain to Nadja about what's going on with Colin. That for Nadja, like, she doesn't care about Colin enough, right? If she saw this, probably her reaction would be like, well, that's really weird and creepy, but also it's definitely not our problem. And I have this promotion and things to do. He'll be fine. So I'm not trying to pretend that if he had talked to her, that she would have agreed to like stay or anything like that. I just think that he would have said something, and eventually him choosing to stay would have felt a little bit like, well, because she refused to pitch in and help or do anything, he had no other choice. But it felt like he really leapt to leaving her high and dry without even giving her a chance to decide what to do, you know, or research it or anything. And if anything, I would think he would have maybe spent the next episode, they would have delayed a little bit and they would have begun researching what's going on with Colin and try and find out a little bit more. Maybe he would have gone back to the book that he tore that page out of, etc. But instead, just shoot after, especially after this speech where he tells her he completely renounced his entire homeland for her sake because they were being shits about her. And he says that to her, and then he goes and does this for Colin, a person who he literally had said in a speech for his birthday that he doesn't really even like the guy. It just feels really, really weird. You know, I am fine with the reveal that something else is going on with Colin. In fact, I think that makes a lot more sense, that he's like transitioning into some other kind of creature. But just Laszlo's reaction feels off, and it feels like it was just a contrived way to fit in a twist at the end of the episode that didn't actually work very well. Let's see. Martin says, I interpreted Evil Mabel's hostile reaction to less being legit anger and more just jealousy. That's sort of what I was thinking. Asher is saying, I agree. It was a weird approach to the issue. Martin says, I do admit it's a bit patchy, to use your excellent parlance. Thank you, because I used that word and I was like, is that the word I want? And then I was like, I think so. But I'm okay with it since I'm just interested in the new dynamic it brings. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, I think that's what I would have liked, is that if he had talked to Nadja about it and she had refused to like sort of cope with Colin and said that it wasn't his issue or her business, I think I would have been interested in seeing Laszlo come to the realization that as much as he loves Nadja, he feels a weird responsibility here that he isn't willing to like let go of, because I feel like that is this is evidence that he actually does like Colin in a way that he hasn't wanted to admit to himself. But I don't know. I feel like there is a way that it could have been done that would have felt like a little bit more character growth in an actual deliberate way. And I'm a little disappointed that they chose it to go this way. But I'm backing up now. So Guillermo is waiting for Nandor in his room. Nandor is like, usually when people are upset, they go to their own room, but I understand why you would come to mine, as it is much superior to your room. And he says, do you want to go through this a whole other time? It's a dangerous world out there. And Guillermo says, I am the one who has been protecting you. If it wasn't for me, you would be dead by now. Because I am a vampire killer. And the only reason you're alive is because I let you live. And I was like, word? And he says it again. Nandor turns around and is like, what? And he says it again. And I was sort of puzzled because Nandor starts laughing. And I was like, honestly, as much as I do believe that Nandor deeply underestimates Guillermo, laughing still felt like a bit extreme of a mean-spirited response. But then he says, you have forgotten about the hypnotizing. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot about the hypnotizing. That's fair. And he says, it makes it physically impossible for you to harm me. And Guillermo says, I pretended to be hypnotized so you wouldn't feel weak. And when he says that, he's kind of grabbed Nandor and got up behind him and wrapped his arm around his neck. And Guillermo says, Nandor says, I never feel weak. And he pulls Guillermo like up over his shoulder and then retrieves a sword from the, what do you call it? The suit of armor that is like standing by the fire. And I was like, oh, so things are starting to get really weird. This is real. And he holds it to Guillermo's chest, who says, Master, your sword needs polishing. And I was like, this just feels it feels like something. Nandor gets distracted, looks at the sword, and Guillermo like does a sweep, gets him on the ground, and then yells plancha. and jumps on him. And basically we just get like a full-on fight between the two of them. And I love this. Nandor chucks a knife at him. Guillermo catches it and throws it back. And he gets the portrait of Nandor on his horse, John, his beloved horse, right in the neck. And I thought Nandor was going to take it personally, but he says, "You almost hit John." And I was like, oh shit. That's adorable. He doesn't even care that he got got it right through the throat. He's just like, "You almost hit the painting of my friend." And then when he turns and comes for Guillermo, Guillermo has a crucifix up and is holding it out, and Nandor begins actually smoking. And he says, "Put it away. You've passed the test." And I really did not buy this for a second. When Guillermo begins to fall for it, I was just like, oh, buddy, come on. And this is the thing, is like, I think maybe it really is all it looks like. I think that Nandor is... I think what you see is what you get with him for the most part. But in the moment, this seemed like a very transparent ruse. And he says, I had been worried that you were going a little soft. Tonight, you have proved to me, finally, that you can take care of yourself. And more importantly, you can take care of me. So I am going to be bringing you with me. Will you do me the honor of accompanying me on my journey around the world? And I just felt like it's going to be the second Guillermo walks out of the room that Nandor is going to tell the camera, "I really thought this fucker was going to kill me." Now, he does say something like he can really move, but that's it. He doesn't seem to take it back. And here in the conversation with Guillermo, he says that we're going to go back to my ancestral homeland and you'll take a knee and I will turn you into a vampire. Again, really? Is he? I can't decide whether he's full of shit or not. I want so much for this to be genuine. I don't want to believe that he's just fucking around, getting Guillermo's hopes up. I think it is supposed to be that he's dead serious, and that is what makes it so much more devastating when Guillermo gets nailed up inside a coffin and sent somewhere else. But in the moment, you guys, I wish that I had really been able to relax and let myself believe it, because I think it would have felt like a more emotional, important moment. And instead, I was so sure that he was full of shit that I didn't really allow any of it to hit or sink in. It reminded me, those of you who watched Jane the Virgin, there is a scene that is in one of the first episodes of the first season where this woman is trying to tell this man that their relationship is over, and he grabs her by the throat and is starting to choke her, and she smiles at him and then tells him, "I just wanted to be sure that you'd fight for me." And he takes it as this was all a test and blah, blah, blah. But she leaves the room and she's clearly really freaked out. And she just played it in the moment because she thought he was going to kill her, and she did what she needed to do for him to not kill her. But so that's what I kind of thought we were going to wind up getting from Nandor here, was the season began with Nandor thinking, what are we going to do with Guillermo? He's really dangerous. I think he is a good guy who saved us and I don't want to kill him. But also, he is what he is. And this is a really kind of messy situation. And I sort of thought, finding out that like, oh, all of that hypnosis doesn't work, and he was able to like potentially could have killed me right here. I thought Nandor was going to be like, maybe I should have killed that guy. And we were going to transition to them being like outright enemies. And instead, I think that it is just that he was being serious about thinking Guillermo had gotten too soft, which feels really weird. I don't know. It feels like it kind of came out of nowhere. Does that make sense? I enjoyed the fight itself a lot. And I, like I said, really did enjoy Guillermo saying to him, "You're only alive because I let you live." I was like, wow, that is actually a pretty baller line. But, I just wish looking back that I had been able to let myself see it at face value instead of trying to like read into it, which is honestly like the fucking story of my life. So what else is new? Miss T says, I thought Nandor knew he was bested. And Martin says, honestly, yeah, I think Nandor was being completely honest here. All right. I accept it. So yeah, this moment is, like Guillermo gets so excited, and I was just so, he's running out of there so excited. And I'm like watching it thinking, oh, the poor fucker. I'm not excited for him because I'm thinking he's being played. But then it turns out, I guess, that he's not being played. But Nandor says that little fucker can really move when he wants to. And I did like that. Anytime that we see Nandor being impressed by anything Guillermo has done, it's such a rare thing that I'm like, I have to enjoy it in the moment. So he begins packing. I love when we see Laszlo trying to bring the witch skin hat, the like cursed hat with him. I fucking cracked up. Nadja knows he has it because he's trying to like sort of keep it behind his back, and somehow she's aware it's there. I don't know how, but she just turns around and screams, "Don't you fucking dare!" And he goes like scurrying back up the stairs with it. So yeah, this is when he says something to Nandor about how like, I'm going to go and help Nadja and Laszlo, and Nandor is scooping his soil, the ancestral soil, out from under his coffin. And he's like, why are you helping them when I'm doing this? And he's like, it's the last time I can say goodbye to them. I thought you'd understand. Fine, I'll allow it, but don't think for 1 second I'll be getting into the habit of scooping my own soil. And then Guillermo says, can you take my luggage to the train station? I don't want to carry it to the dock and then have to carry it back. And Nandor says, what, am I working for you now? And again, because I'm thinking he's full of shit, I'm thinking he's serious here. And then quickly, I'm kidding, Guillermo. I will take your bag for you. You guys, I would like all of this. I'm just kidding. I'm 100% thinking, no, he's not. He's not kidding. He just doesn't, like, he's just trying to keep it together long enough for him to be able to ditch Guillermo. Imagine my surprise. Imagine my surprise, y'all. Like, so this is when Evil Mabel comes in. Got you a little card that says Bon Voyage with these weird scratches inside. The Wraith's signatures, they don't know how to write, or some of them have forgotten, so I just dipped their claws in ink and let them go at it. I don't know. I like this. I like the weird fucking like bird hat that she's wearing. The whole thing is very awkward, but like weirdly sweet. The whole thing with her and her reaction to Nadja, I'm wondering if we're going to get more of that in season 4, because I don't know. There's just a real sense of like feeling as if she got overlooked somehow, you know? So I'm interested in that. But I'm trying to see if there's, okay. So then we have the whole thing with Nandor going to the train station. You guys, I don't know why it cracked me up so bad. Him dragging Guillermo's suitcase with him. And he's dragging it up the stairs to the train platform, but he's dragging it up in the wrong direction, not in the direction that the wheels actually turn. I don't know why. That really cracked me up. There was something about it that I have this thing sometimes where I will watch a person do something and it'll, sometimes it'll be Owen, sometimes it'll be like his grandmother, anybody that I'm around enough to see them doing ordinary everyday tasks in front of me. And they'll do something like this, like just dragging it in a direction that you're just making it harder on yourself. It's just an illogical way to do it. And I want to chime in and be like, why don't you turn it this way? But I feel like I can be bossy too often. And so I hold back a lot more lately in my life because of just being like, you know what? It does make their life harder. But do you really want to be the one constantly telling them how to do a thing? And so I try and restrain myself, and then I'll watch it, having decided I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to let them carry on with this weird method. And I find myself growing so agitated as I watch that I then have to interrogate why I'm having the reaction I'm having. And just be like, girl, why are you flipping out right now inside your head? Yeah, he's dragging them the wrong way up the stairs. It's not a great way to do this, but he got to the top of the stairs and it no longer matters and it's fine. But I will see this, you guys, Owen's grandma, those of you who have watched the last season of Great British Bake Off and the episode where they made tacos may remember the British lady desperately trying to peel an avocado in such a way that I am shocked she didn't slice a finger off. Do you know that his grandmother tried to cut an avocado in that exact same way right in front of me one time? And that was a time when I did step in because it looked like she was going to cut herself. And it was just, but I had to rationalize it. I feel like looking like she's going to cut herself was a rationalization, to be honest. It was just giving me such agita. So anyway, it's just such a little thing. And it is so, I think, indicative of Nandor's character to just not really be paying attention, not really give a shit. He's just dragging it up there. He doesn't care. I 100% buy this. It was just funny to me how angry I got about it. But yeah, so Nandor waits on that platform and Guillermo doesn't show. And it's honestly such a bummer. He's got his little Jansport backpack on with his amazing coat, which I desperately want. And finally, he just gets on the train and leaves the suitcase sitting there. And I am so bummed about that. The fact that he just left it. I don't know why, but that felt... He could have waited. He could have sat there at the train station and waited. He didn't. Now, I know what's happened to Guillermo. So even if he had left... or even if he had stayed, it's not like it would have changed because Guillermo is gone. He's in this box. It's bon voyage for Guillermo. But it's interesting that it doesn't seem like it occurred to him to wait. And even if you didn't wait, not bringing the suitcase with you, what does he think happened? Does he think Guillermo just had a change of heart? What is, and as he gets on and he sits down, he looks really sad and devastated, like he didn't expect for things to go this way, which was the first time that I even began to consider that he had been serious about any of this, was when I saw the look on his face. And then we go to Laszlo, who is writing this letter to Nadja about where he is and what has happened. And I don't know. I think that he wound up including this letter in the coffin with her or something. I don't even remember if we see that. But yeah, we follow the like course of events with him going downstairs to see Colin's body and eventually following this weird slime trail and finding this weird Colin baby holding its glasses in a like far corner of the basement. And it is extremely unnerving. And I hated it desperately. Just truly hated it. Him being all slimy too. Like what is happening here? I am fine with the concept though of Colin now being a baby, because let's be honest, if you want to be like an energy vampire, a baby, that is a damn good like choice. That is between babies and, speaking from experience, puppies, energy vampires does not even come close. I feel like, it's like practically possession. Martin says, I got the vibe that this was the equivalent of Nandor being left at the altar. Oh, Martin, that's so sad. Why'd you have to bring it to that level? But I think you're right. Ugh. He was about to go on his honeymoon. Well, that's the end of season 3. So, wild. I just don't know, you guys. This was a weird season with a lot of ups and downs, so I'm real curious about 4. I'm going to wrap up, but thank you guys for joining me. Interested in how y'all felt. And thank you, Max, for commissioning it. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.